It's my great pleasure to introduce the next speaker, our chairwoman, Mariarosaria Taddeo. Probably you know her. She is a research fellow in cybersecurity at Warwick University, research associate at Oxford University, president of the International Association of Computing and Philosophy, and last week, I think, she has been awarded in the 2030 World Technology Award. The topic is cyber warfare ethics and regulatory gap. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you very much. You have to give me 15 seconds. Hopefully technology will help. So I have a tradition that usually doesn't work. And no, it does. Great. Let's see. Okay. So I'll promise to be brief as much as I can. Ludovica is supposed to chair me, but I told her that as soon as she starts doing that annoying thing with the minutes, I'm going to get upset. So basically, the power is on in my hands. So the topic is trying to consider the regulatory gaps that comes with cyber warfare and how we can fill it using ethics. So I will start by making a couple of proviso, so to sort of cut the area of the problem I want to address and the approach I want to endorse. Define the problem and the reasons behind the problem itself. Consider a bit the risks that we run if we decide not to address the problem, which is a possible choice. And then provide a solution which in itself assumes that we decide to address the problem. By then, we will be ready to conclude this workshop. So, the first proviso. This talk is not about describing the current state practice or possible emerging state practice, nor is it about describing how we can adapt existing bodies of law to the occurrences of cyber warfare. The topic is much more, or the talk is much more focused on considering whether existing laws, existing state practice and policies address in the right way the regulation of cyber warfare. And the right way means, since I'm an ethicist, is the one that mirrors the contemporary moral values which are emerging in information societies. So that's the criterion I'm going to endorse in assessing the problem later in a moment. The second proviso is that by cyber warfare, I mean the use of information and communication technologies within an offensive or defensive military strategy endorsed by a state and aiming at the immediate disruption or control of the enemy's resources, and which is waged within an informational environment with targets and agents ranging both on physical and non-physical domain, and on whose level of violence may vary upon circumstances. Now, the definition is quite long, but it allows me to streamline the scenario in a very specific way. So first of all, I'm focusing on the deployment of ICTs made by an actor who has political authority. And this allows me to not to focus on cybercrime, cyber terrorism, cyber activism. So it's a very specific phenomenon. The second aspect I want to stress or capture attention on is that cyber warfare can, of course, originates from the cybersphere, but also can target cyber object or information infrastructure, abstract object, virtual, and physical concrete things. And the level of violence which may characterize cyber warfare varies upon the circumstances and depending on the kind of targets we are considering. So the lesson to capture there is that cyber warfare is transversal. It goes all the way from physical to non-physical and from non-violent to violence. And these are aspects which are going to be important in a couple of minutes. So the problem. Well, the problem is twofold. One has to do with the very nature of law and the regulations, which are meant to be evolving over time and to respond to the environment and to the changes occurring in the environment. So law is by nature dynamic, and it's quite unlikely that the existence body of law and cyber warfare will remain the same while technology and the environment will continue to change over the years. So we have to be ready about and to start to think about it. Now, two questions can be asked in this sense. And one is about how we can imagine the law of cyber warfare to change in the course of the years. And the other is which kind of principle we should follow or we should endorse while law changes over the years. The second problem is a bit more, how to say, a short-term problem, in the sense that there are already aspects of the occurrences of cyber warfare which prove to be problematic when considered in the eye or in the light of the laws that we already have. And it's not just the laws that we have. Some aspects of cyber warfare seem to be problematic, even from an ethical perspective. So even when you just try to apply current ethical frameworks of war to the cases of cyber warfare. So I will just make a couple of examples considering jus in bellum and jus ad bellum. And those examples will focus both on a legal or regulatory aspect and on ethical aspects. So the first thing, jus ad bellum, which of course refers to the reasons or the criteria by which states can resort to force. And there is the famous Article 204 from the UN Charter, which states that all members should refrain in their international relation from the threat or use of force against territory, integrity, or political independence of another state, or in any other manner inconsistent with the purpose of the United Nations. The only two exceptions are self-defense and UN-authorized missions. Now, the question you might be tempted to ask there, is what counts as a use of force? What is a use of force in the case of cyber warfare? And this is a very interesting question. The Italian manual addresses, a lot of scholars addressed it. They got the wrong perspective, because there is a lot of stuff that gets left unattended if we just focus on those cases of cyber warfare that count as a use of force. There is a lot of most of the occurrences of cyber warfare or cyber attacks do not count as a use of force. They are not physically violent. They are not targeting physical object. And there is a compelling need to focus and to consider also those instances of cyber warfare. Again, another article which specifies that nothing in the present charter shall impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations until the Security Council has taken measures necessary to maintain international peace and security. And the question there will be, when does a cyber operation amount to an armed attack? And the armed attack is, by the way, considered to be worse than just the use of force. Well, it's a very interesting question, again. But how do we treat those operations that might be considered as a use of force, but not as an armed attack? How do we consider those operations, those cases of cyber warfare, which are not that violent, which are not that destructive? All those cases seem sort of to escape the attention and the focus of lawmakers, and sometimes also of ethicists. And here is an ethical problem. The principle of more good than harm is perhaps one of the most interesting principles of the just war theory tradition, understood as an ethical theory. And he states that before declaring war, a state must consider the universal good expected to follow from the decision to wage war against the universal evils expected to result, so casualties, physical destruction. Now, a state is justified in declaring war only when the foreseeable goods, are more than the expected evils. Sounds pretty reasonable. The criteria, of course, to evaluate the good and the evils, it's the physical damage. So how many people you're going to kill, how much of a state physical infrastructure you are going to destroy. Well, by this criterion, non-violent occurrences of cyber warfare comply by default by the principle of good, more good than evil, as destroying digital database, harvesting records, impairing industrial development are deemed to be ethically sound actions within the just war theory framework, as they do not constitute a physical damage in a complex scenario. So it's, by the way, not the validity of the principle that I'm discussing. We want, of course, cyber warfare to do more good than harm. I'm not saying that the principle doesn't work anymore. I'm just saying that the application of the principle becomes quite problematic when we consider cyber warfare, and in particular, the non-violent occurrences of cyber warfare. And by non-violent, we mean those occurrences of cyber warfare that do not target physical objects. Problems also occur in the jus in bello. I like to focus on two aspects. One is the definition provided of an attack in one of the additional protocols to the Geneva Convention, which specifies the attacks means as an act of violence against the adversary, whether in offense or in defense. Now, this is a very interesting aspect to consider, just because in order to be able to address the cases of cyber warfare and to put it in relation with this definition of attack, scholars, like those who participated in Tallinn Manual, well, they had to use a deflated understanding of the concept of violence, as we understand violence as something that will interfere with the functional ability of the usability of an object. And it was very interesting to see that, so basically, even lawmakers are moving in the direction where Dr. Durante was pointing yesterday. We need to sort of redefine and reconsider some of the traditional concepts we are used to deal with when it comes to cyber warfare or to warfare in general. Furthermore, another definition of attack, which specifies that an attack may be expected to cause incidental loss, of civilian life, injuries to civilians, damage to civilians' object, or a combination thereof, which would be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. Well, this is about the proportionality. The point there is, how do you find out what's an object? An object is a physical, tangible thing, something that is concrete. Data might be different things, but they do not necessarily enjoy the properties of being tangible and visible. So it becomes difficult to understand how to capture the idea of data as something that is an object which might be then following in the need to be regulated by this principle. So the whole thing about these first three points of the talk was to identify an area which is now really straightforwardly addressed by both the ethical theories that we have for warfare and the rules and regulations that we are used to endorse. So we're now ready to consider why this problem arises and how we can solve them. You remember a few slides ago I told you, well, cyber warfare is transversal, thank you. And the idea is that when you think about cyber warfare and warfare itself, you might have this mental picture. On the one side, you have physical object, physical targets, and actions that are medium to highly violent. On the other side, you have digital agents, digital targets, and actions which are generally not really that violent. And if you think about traditional warfare, well, that's the blue part of the mental picture. The point is that when you think about cyber warfare, it's not just the white part of the mental picture, it's this mental picture. Because all of it's included in it. You can have artificial agents and physical agents working in it. You can have targets which range from a database to the next electric power building, and the actions can go from no violence at all to a high level of violence. And this is where the problem arises. Because traditional form of ethical analysis of warfare and the policies and regulations that are conceptually grounded on those analyses, well, they rest on an anthropocentric view of warfare, and moreover, they are all focused to limit bloodshed, to safeguard individual liberties to life, and so they focus on physical, concrete thing and to violence in the old traditional understanding of the concept. So such a conceptualization are actually challenged by the non-kinetic case of cyber warfare and by the heterogeneity of the agents and targets involved in it. And the next step from that is that, so we need to not only accept that moral theories, but also existing laws and regulation are, by using another metaphor, too coercive to address the cases of cyber warfare. Most of the cases, those who are not violent, seems to escape the net of the laws and regulation, but also the net of traditional ethical theories of cyber warfare. Now, the risk we run is that existing laws and regulation may even satisfactorily address the violent cases. That's not the real deal. I mean, there is no doubt that if you use a cyber weapon as a means to cause the exact same damage or a similar damage that you will use to cause with a traditional weapon, then you will treat the cyber weapons in the same way in which you treat traditional weapons. But the non-violent cases of cyber warfare, well, they sort of seem to fall in a sort of gray area. The problem is that the gray area, which might end up being under-regulated, is where all the core of the cyber warfare happens, is where the most of the cyber warfare happens. So we run the risk to develop a new kind of warfare, to endorse it and to use it, and increasingly use it day after day, and to end up having not a complete or exhaustive way of regulating and managing it. Now, the solution, 2 steps. The first one is that the solution rests on an approach or on a vision, according to which, well, we need to understand that cyber warfare is a phenomenon encompassed in a bigger revolutionary process, which is the so-called information revolution. We learned yesterday that we live by the digit and we might also die by the digit. And the idea is that, well, as our society becomes increasingly dependent from information infrastructures, those infrastructures and information itself acquire moral stance. And we should be prepared to recognize such a stance, the moral status of information itself, and to make this reconnaissance the grounding of new policies and new principles regulating cyber warfare. And of course, this is not a job for ethicists alone. We should really try to embrace and foster interdisciplinary collaboration between lawyers, military, and ethicists as well. A more in-detail solution, the first step perhaps, rests on the endorsement of the so-called information ethics. Now, for those of you who were here yesterday, we have already heard a lot about information ethics, so I'll try to be quick. The ultimate good in information ethics is the flourishing of the informational entities living into the infosphere. And the infosphere is, to put it bluntly and generally, and Luciano will excuse me, the entire reel of things that exist taken from an informational perspective. So the flourishing of the universe, whatever exists, it's the ultimate good, and the ultimate evil is the corruption of whatever exists, in informational corruption, in the sense of the destruction, impoverishment, and vandalization of information. 4 principles, which were also described yesterday, sort of dictate how the battle between the flourishing and the corruption of information can be conducted. The principles are overridable, so we go from, they represent minimal condition to be achieved, 0 being the most fundamental, and 1 to 3 being progressively desirable. And there we are. So information corruption ought to be caused, not to be caused, not to be prevented, and to be removed from the infosphere. And the information ought to be promoted by extending, improving, enriching, and opening the infosphere. This is by ensuring informational quantity, quality, variety, security, ownership, privacy, pluralism, and access. How does this apply to the case of cyber warfare? Well, it does because, as I said before, it's not the issue of, when it comes to just war theory, it's not that the principles are not valid anymore. The point is making them applicable to the cases of a warfare in which not just physical things are involved, not just human things are involved, but artificial agents and data infrastructure are involved as well. In order to make sure that just war theory may apply also to this sort of new domain, we need to expand or extend its scope so that we can consider the moral stance of those non-physical objects and perhaps abandon the anthropocentric approach of just war theory. So the rationale to do so is the following. Cyber warfare should be considered just as long as it is waged against malicious entities and to safeguard the well-being of the infosphere. And furthermore, there are 3 principles that may be guidance in this respect. Cyber warfare ought to be waged only against those entities who endanger or disrupt the well-being of the infosphere. Cyber warfare ought to be waged to preserve the well-being of the infosphere. And cyber warfare ought not to be waged to promote the well-being of the infosphere. Allow me 3 minutes more, and I won't bother you anymore. So we refer to the cyber warfare as something that is waged against the entities who endanger the infosphere as entities who cause informational infrastructures or come into conflict with the rights of other entities, well, they lose their right to exist. So against those entities, we are in a right position if we decide to engage in a cyber war action. So it is a moral duty to remove such a malicious entity for the infosphere, or at least to impede that such an entity will continue doing its evil job. And then we have the duty to preserve the well-being of the infosphere. And so this means that, well, cyber warfare is justly endorsed only insofar as we use it to restore the status quo into the infosphere, so that to bring the infosphere to the status in which it was before, the malicious entities will start to increase the entropy in it or to corrupt the informational environment. And so cyber warfare is just only insofar as it repairs, so to say, the infosphere from the damage done by the malicious entities. And this links us to the last principle, that is that we cannot consider cyber warfare as a proactive measure to improve the well-being of the infosphere. It should be a proactive measure to stop the damage to be perpetrated, but not as something that is used to make the infosphere flourishing furthermore. So fostering the well-being of the infosphere falls beyond the scope of just cyber warfare. And so just to conclude a few things, the most important aspect is to understand that cyber warfare is one of the most compelling aspects of the information revolution, and that as such we might encounter in a situation in which current cyber laws or regulation may struggle to address the cases of cyber warfare, as well as existent ethical framework. We don't need, by the way, to throw away the baby with the bathwater, as they used to say, because we might be able to embrace and endorse existing ethical principles, at least, and apply them to the case of cyber warfare, insofar as we are able to expand the scope and the ontology of the moral or the ethical analysis. And finally, let me stress what was also one of the main points of this workshop. We don't need as ethicists to do this by ourselves, but it's an endeavor in which lawmakers, military, and scholars should embrace all together. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, we start the time for the questions. Do you have any questions?
So just to clarify some of the terms then, an entity in the infosphere. Human beings are not entities in the infosphere, is that correct?
No, it's wrong.
They are?
They are. We all are. The cherries.
Okay, so human beings have rights.
Yes.
And they're entities in the infosphere. Okay, that makes sense. Now, do other entities in the infosphere have rights?
So every entity in the infosphere, as an informational entity, has right. The point there, the catch, and the catch is the key, and we have to be careful, because most of the people don't get the catch. But the key there is that we all have the same initial rights, which are very minimal, and are the right to exist and flourish. But those rights can be overridden, and can be overridden depending on the entities we're considering as some entities. By contributing more to the well-being of the infosphere, or the flourishing of the infosphere, might have a stronger or more important set of rights, which might override the rights of other entities.
So are there non-human entities in the infosphere that have rights?
Yes, yes.
Okay, now explain how a non-human entity has a right.
So
that's the question. That's
the question, good. I could do it easily and ask Luciano, but I will be kind to the old professor and take the job. So the point there is that all entities can be considered as informational entities. And they have right because of their informational nature, assuming that being the informational part is what gives them the moral stance. Now, the catch again is that all entities having right doesn't mean that all the entities have the same rights, or that all the same rights are equally important. And that's what makes the difference. Does it answer to your question?
Okay, other questions?
I'm really struggling with the infosphere. This is the first time I've come across this idea.
Really?
Yeah, I'm completely new to this field, so I'm a complete newbie. Okay. Noob, I think they call it in the infosphere.
So,
where do I start? And I can't, as a philosopher, I can get myself to believe lots of things, but I'm having trouble with this one because, you know, I went home last night, I was talking to my wife about the idea that information has rights, and I was clearing out my inbox after 2 days of not doing so, and she pointed out I must have been committing sort of information genocide by deleting all these emails. And, you know, that sort of the Humean sort of idea comes into my head that I can believe it's here, but as soon as I leave this room, I can't quite believe that information has rights in and of itself. What I can believe is that there are certain parts of the infosphere that are so important that they, therefore, should be protected, but they're only important insofar as they further our particular interests. So all information related to critical infrastructure would be the obvious case of energy, would be the obvious one, I guess. And I can see why you should protect that. And I see why you should give that protected status. But the rest of the infosphere, quite frankly, is probably made up of pictures of cats and people's babies and other nefarious activities. And I just don't see why that should have the same status. Okay. Sorry, I put that in a sort of silly way, but no. I need help.
So let's see if I can shed some light there. And yeah, we agree on the cat's picture. Amazingly useless. So first thing, it's not information that has rights, but informational entities. So we have to be careful about the terminology here. But that's not even the point. The main point is that when we say that all entities into the infosphere have rights, we're not saying that all entities into the infosphere have the same rights or enjoy rights at the same level. I specified those rights are overridable. So the idea is that everything that exists starts with some sort of very minimal equal rights to exist and flourish. As soon as their rights conflicts or doesn't even contribute to the well-being of the infosphere or the flourishing infosphere, it can be overridden. So the spam email, oh, you did a very good job deleting it. Cat's picture, let's get rid of those. That's the point, in a very nutshell. And I think, yeah.
Okay, the next one.
I would like to ask you one thing, Mariarosaria. You put the fact that there is an information entity at risk, only when an information entity is, sorry, let me put it better. So cyber war is legitimate only, one of the conditions is that in order to protect an information entity or something similar. Your first point in one of those slides that we have just seen, sorry. Okay, ought to be waged only against, okay, those entities who endanger or disrupt the well-being of the infosphere. So I was wondering, since human beings are information entities, therefore for protecting human beings it is okay, but for protecting a physical infrastructure, is it not allowed?
Why is it not allowed? Yeah, no. Well, it's the well-being
of... A bridge or whatever, is it?
The well-being of the infosphere encompasses all informational entities, so...
even physical objects?
Even physical objects. Yes. Informational is meant to be...
So what is excluded from the first one? What kind of object is...
There is nothing that is excluded. Okay. So everything can be... We are allowed to wage cyber warfare in a just way. The only condition there is that as long as we do it just to stop those entities who endanger the infosphere. So whoever entity endangers the infosphere can be a illicit target of cyber warfare. That's the way of...
Okay, next question from Professor Floridi.
Just a short premise and then a request for a clarification. The premise is this. I suppose I go home and I speak to my wife and I said, well, I was told that, went to this conference and they said that this huge, well actually mid-size bags of H2O, they deserve, as of today, some respect. Isn't that laughable? I go back, open the fridge, have a glass of water, we carry on. And then my wife says, Luciano, you're a damn idiot. You know that you're made of water, don't you? So you know that what they were talking about was actually you. You as seen from a chemical perspective as mainly H2O. I say, oh, sorry, yeah, oh, that's what I meant. So I've been told by my wife that basically what the problem is that my silly way of laughing about respect for water was actually a problem of level of abstraction, which somewhere, I suspect, should find a place in your presentation. Somewhere we should explain to Luciano going back home laughing with his wife that he is confused about the level of abstraction at which he's laughing his head off. Would that be something fair to say about your talk? Is that criticism or a way of perhaps helping you to develop this line of reasoning?
No, it's levels of abstraction are, as you know, a structural point of the approach. The point is that I had to be shorter, and introducing level of abstraction required other 3 slides. So I thought that if I could, mistakenly perhaps, but sort of make levels of abstraction pass as a perspective in a more general and incorrect way. But no, levels of abstraction as a way of defining the variables of the aspect we were going to focus on, and as the aspect on which we're going to model our analysis of cyber warfare. Yes, of course, they are the key, the methodological key to address this talk. Thank you.
Okay, other two more questions?
I'm a little uncomfortable with the concept of entities that have differing levels of rights. I mean, we come from a tradition in the US that we are endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights, perhaps a little bit different than some of the wording you all come at this from. I'll throw a very quick scenario out. So if we say that an entity that is malicious in terms of the infosphere can be attacked, who defines that sense of maliciousness? So when you talk about the idea of, vandalizing information, if you have, say, a dissident press that's promoting a viewpoint opposed to a state entity.
Say again, it's promoting?
A dissident press organization promoting viewpoints opposed to that of a state entity. That state entity could very easily claim that this is vandalizing public information in the infosphere. That would seem to justify an attack that we intuitively, I think, all know is not correct, that a state should be allowed to oppress dissident viewpoints. I'm somewhat concerned by where this leads us. Can you perhaps allay some of my concerns?
I'll try, I hope so. So the way we understand the vandalizing or the corruption of information is very, very specific. And so we're not at liberty to fuss too much about it. So I will refer to you to this for principle about it. But the catch that is there, and you're right, is that this approach will make cyber warfare as something that can be waged, I won't say more freely or more liberally, but as something that we sort of have a moral duty to do as a correction of the evil. So that leads us to an idea of cyber warfare that is a tool to maintain the status quo. So to use a bad analogy, it would be the idea of using cyber warfare the way we use police. So you want police to act to keep the level of crime low, and you are at ease with police acting, and you want police presence because it will make the level of crime and danger low. And so the idea is that cyber warfare will be something that is used with the same sort of attitude to keep the level of evil activities into the infosphere low. It's more permissible in this sense than other frameworks which are concerned with traditional warfare. It's perhaps more American-wise.
Okay, the last question. I'm very uneasy when you mention when you start mentioning God, because it's very, very, very bad. So information, wrong or right information, I don't know. I mean, there is true information and there is misinformation and disinformation when it comes to be false content. But in your case, that's not even the point. The point is the framework in which this ethics from which this ethics stems is consequentialist. So it's about the consequences of what you do. And if you say that the Holocaust was false or never happened, it's not even about the fact that you are stating something false. It's that you are harming, in a moral way, perhaps, thousands and billions of people, and that's evil, and that's it. So it goes down to the consequences or the effects of what you utter in this case. Okay, before the panel, I would take the opportunity to thank you, Mariarosaria, for the excellent work made with our center. And I have here a special gift for you, because I think that you are a special person.
Now, the idea is she thinks I'm going to cry, but I won't. Yeah, really? Thank you very much. That's amazing. Thank you. Oh, thank you, guys. And thank you guys for the opportunity. I had so much fun. It was great. Thank you.